All right. Welcome, y'all. Here I have with me. Introduce yourself.
Marshall Allen.
All right, Marshall. It is. First of all, thank you, thank you for allowing me to do this because it's kind of still something new that I'm testing out, but I think this is pretty cool. As far as poets go, definitely got a lot of respect for Marshall, and I feel like he was one of the best people to start with as far as talking about the subject. And what we're gonna be hitting up on is the involvement of poetry and social justice and how it kind of like it's a back and forth of shaping each other. One of the first questions I want to ask you was, what drew you to poetry?
I've been in the NAACP since I was in the 6th grade. That's where I started, and I started with oratory, speech writing, and stuff like that. I started with essays and eventually went into speech writing because I was so uniquely different in speeches from all of my other peers and all the other people that were my age that I identified with as far as friends. The speeches and the category of oratory itself seemed to be old-fashioned at the time. Honestly, I originally hated poetry because of the way we were taught it in school. The poetry we were taught in school was very whitewashed. Shakespeare, iambic pentameter, a lot of stuff that no one really cares about when you're getting into the heart and the depth of poetry. So I originally was opposed to poetry until I heard Change by B. Young, who's actually one of my favorite spoken word artists. And when I heard poetry, when I heard his poem in regards to black people, the struggle, the movement, and stuff like that, I realized that all I had to do was take my speech writing or my oratory and channel it into a different way. So that's originally what drew me to poetry. I had already been started in it, but after hearing B. Young, I decided that, this is something I could do.
That's really powerful because, I mean, to go from feeling like it was like an obstacle in front of you, like poetry, it's something you had to conform to being like a way to express yourself and all people to look up to you. I think that's something that people don't always remember. Like it's not something that you have to utilize by changing yourself. It's to be an extension of yourself. But what do you think? Like, did your involvement with poetry lead you towards topics like social justice, or do you think you just eventually combined because of like other interests in your life?
I mean, honestly, the movement and the amount of love that I have for my people is inherent within me. So I can't separate the love I have for my people any more than I can separate, myself from being black or the blackness that I have. The fact that I was able to speak, that I had that talent or that gift just came with it. So like the two became inseparable. If I was already writing speeches, I already had love for my people. I mean, it was just something that naturally fell into place because it's something that if I'm going to be speaking, if I'm going to be in front of people, if I'm going to be talking, if I'm going to be opening these dialogues, I mean, my people have to come first and they have to be within whatever it is that I'm doing. So as far as like combining the two, it wasn't really a combination for me. It was just something that was already there because I was already using what I had to my advantage or to the advantage of my people.
I definitely feel you on that because I mean, like personally, for a long time I didn't know how to voice my opinions on things, and poetry and things like that. That was the way I felt like I could really speak. It felt less judged, and I could kind of like get myself.
Because you're on a platform when you do poetry. Everybody has to listen. When you get up on stage, everybody has to stop and listen to whatever it is that you have to say. It doesn't matter how they feel about it. It doesn't matter if it's the right opinion. It doesn't matter if it's statistically right, if it's wrong, if it's biased, if it's anything. When you get up on stage, when you have a piece you need to perform, everyone has to listen to it. And that's the key thing about poetry, the key thing about performing in and of itself is that whatever message that you have, whatever extension of yourself that you're putting out there, it has to be received,
Now, do you think that you could live without one or the other involved in your life, the aspect of using poetry or otherwise being involved in the black community and other issues like social justice?
Not at all. What I tell people all the time, especially our brothers and sisters, is that your existence in and of itself is political. To be black in America, that is a political statement. So there isn't an option to not be political, to not be aware, as far as when it comes to me, because you have to understand that being black in and of itself is political. There's so much that goes into it, whether it be structural racism or systematic oppression or respectability or intersectionality. There's so much that goes into blackness that cannot be defined or confined to cookie cutter forms or thought or mental prototypes. It's something that you definitely have to have with you at all times, and it's not something that I can separate and live without. I can't see myself living without the love I have for my people or the wanting to advance them any more than I could see the platform that I have when I'm speaking. Because like I said, this is something I had always been doing. When I finally was able to delve into poetry, it became a different story, to where when I had a thought, I had a more strategic way of expressing it rather than, long drawn out sentences explaining. I had more, figurative language, more wit, more quick metaphors, I guess, stuff that grabbed the audience's attention, saying exactly what I had to say, but making it short and concise. Excuse me. So, definitely, they definitely can't be separated. And having one without the other, honestly, I can't even see that, because, poetry is one of the most ultimate forms of self-expression. Next to, a friend of mine said next to tattoos. But poetry is one of the most ultimate forms of self-expression. Everybody has to express themselves at one point in time. And for poets, we just have that upper hand, so to say, because we have the vocabulary, or we have the comfortability around people to be able to express our thoughts from paper, verbally and stuff like that. So definitely not something that I could separate or have one without the other.
Now I know a lot of times, especially I've seen like in performances through indie poets, collective we have on campus, that definitely I feel like it definitely impacts how people feel about the issues that go on around campus, because there's a presence that's there with everyone that's there. But
always,
do you think that just because it's an art form and people definitely have a respect and they have a certain amount of attention for the arts, that poetry and spoken word and other forms of artistic expression, they've had like a big effect on how people speak out about issues?
Honestly, the arts in and of themselves are kind of dying. But when you think of poetry, poetry is always the one art where people say poetry is a lost art or poetry is a dying art. And to some extent I agree with that, because you don't find many poets these days, like you did the way you were taught in school, whole books full of poetry or this and that. You don't find that, especially not the style, the type or style that we do as spoken word poets. So with that, poetry is, like I said, to some extent it is a dying art, but everyone listens. Poetry is still something that has the ability to rock people at their core. Poetry is something you can make people laugh, you can make people cry, you can make people happy, you can make people sad. Like, poetry is something that everyone is going to listen to at the end of the day. Is it always recognized as being, the forefront and, the most popular thing to do? No. Is it oftentimes overlooked? Definitely. But when poets get up there to speak, regardless of their message, everyone is going to listen, because that's in and of itself the power of poetry. The power of organizing your thoughts every day in a skillful manner. That's the essence of poetry in and of itself, to organize your thoughts and convey a message of self-expression. So, like I said, regardless of how people feel about it, regardless of how they look at it, it's still something that everyone at the end of the day is going to listen to, something that everyone is going to heed to. So when you get up there, you're talking about social justice, that's something that's going to resonate on the hearts and the minds of everyone, especially if the audience that you're speaking with, it affects them the most. There are a lot of people nowadays who feel that, like, poetry isn't really poetry unless it has something of substance. Unless we're talking about issues, unless we're creating a dialogue, because a lot of times it is the poets who create those dialogues. You hear something in the poem, you hear, well, wow, he said his black is beautiful. What exactly does that mean? Then you have these open dialogues, you have these open discussions, you have these open talks, and this integration of different ideas and values, because, like I said, it comes from the poets. Poets honestly have a lot of unspoken responsibility. In a sense, we're known for being radical or being extreme because we express ourselves in a manner and on such a platform to where everyone has to listen. So it's definitely something that affects people all the time.
Man, I just want to thank you just
No
for
problem, no problem.
coming out and speaking. But just one last thing before we end this interview, or not even conversation, as I've been trying to keep saying. But do you have any words of advice for aspiring writers and performers and just fellow seekers of change?
Keep writing. Never stop. Never stop. There are going to be nights where you can't sleep because you have something to write down. Write it down. I know a lot of poets are old school and like to keep journals to handwrite. Me personally, I can't read my handwriting when I'm going really fast, so I have to keep it on my phone. But if you're asleep and you wake up in the middle of the night, you have a thought, you have a verse, even if it's just a word, write it down. You know, if you're walking on campus and you feel words coming to you, because there'll be times, you know, where you're walking or you're in a conversation or you're zoned out or you're reading and you'll have stuff that comes to you. Write it down. Never stop writing. That is crucial to, one, your sanity, and two, sparking change. Never stop writing. Especially for new poets who first start. Most people who are introduced to poetry, they're introduced to, like, you know, the top of the line, you know, Def Jam and Button Poetry and these national poet competitions, and that's great. But then it comes that comparison, and that's when stuff gets hard. That's what turns a lot of people off. Well, I'm not as good as such and such. It doesn't matter. All you have to do is keep writing. You'll develop into your style, you develop into your form, you develop into what you do, what you don't do, what you like, what you don't like, and then you will eventually begin to evolve as a writer, as a person, as an expressionist. That's going to come naturally. Never stop writing.
All right, man. Some powerful. See, okay. First of all, if the people want to hear any more wise words, see what you're up to. Is there anything you want to plug? Anything like social media?
Indie Poets at Indie, INDIE _ capital POETS. We meet every Thursday at 6 o'clock. Locations vary. We're also the first people to know about any performances on campus, sometimes in local communities. So anytime you want to find out what poetry is, what it sounds like, where to go, how to perform, Indie Poets will be the place to go.
All right, so everyone, if you are on the campus and you do go to Mizzou, check out Indie Poets if you're looking for some intellectual people tackling some hard-hitting topics. All right. Thank you guys for listening. Signing off.